नमो ब्रह्मादिभ्यो ब्रह्मविद्या संप्रदायकर्तृभ्यो वंश ऋषिभ्यो महद्भ्यो नमो गुरुभ्यः। सर्वोपप्लवरहितः प्रज्ञानघनः प्रत्यगर्थो ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि ब्रह्मैवाहमस्मि। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। ॐ ईशावास्यमिदं सर्वं यत्किञ्च जगत्यां जगत् तेन त्यक्तेन भुञ्जीथा मा गृधः कस्य स्विद्धनं कुर्वन्नेवेह कर्माणि जिजीविषेच्छतं समाः। एवं त्वयि नान्यथेतोऽस्ति न कर्म लिप्यते नरे। असुर्या नाम ते लोका अन्धेन तमसा वृताः तांस्ते प्रेत्याभिगच्छन्ति ये के चात्महनो जनाः। अनेजदेकं मनसो जवीयो नैनद्देवा आप्नुवन् पूर्वमर्षत् तद्धावतोऽन्यानत्येति तिष्ठत् तस्मिन्नपो मातरिश्वा दधाति। तदेजति तन्नैजति तद्दूरे तदवन्तिके तदन्तरस्य सर्वस्य तदु सर्वस्यास्य बाह्यतः यस्तु सर्वाणि भूतानि आत्मनि सर्वभूतेषु चात्मानं ततो न विजुगुप्सते। यस्तु सर्वाणि भूतानि आत्मैवाभूद्विजानतः तत्र को मोहः कः शोक एकत्वमनुपश्यतः। सपर्यगाच्छुक्रमकायमव्रणम् अस्नाविरं शुद्धमपापविद्धं कविर्मनीषी परिभूः स्वयंभूर्याथा तथ्यतोऽर्थान् व्यदधाच्छाश्वतीभ्यः समाभ्यः। अन्धं तमः प्रविशन्ति ये अविद्यामुपासते ततो भूय इव ते तमो य उविद्याया गुङ्रताः। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः। So these were the 9 mantras which we had already studied. With the 9th mantra, with the 9th verse, a new section in the Upanishad had started. But since, because such a long time has passed, which was unplanned for, this long break, I'll touch a little bit upon the mantra which we have already studied, because the next two mantras, the 10th one and the 11th one, are both deeply related to the ninth one. They all go three together. Their meaning is deeply interconnected with each other. First of all, the word mantra itself. I have pointed out various meanings of this word. I discussed some of its meanings and also its deeper meanings, that a mantra on an initial level is a collection of words. That is just the first meaning. Then on the second level, the word mantra means the state of the mind, that such a collection of words which were put together, were composed, or to use the expression that the rishis themselves use, chiseled in their hearts, to express their own mental state. And when a person acquires that mental state within himself, that is the second meaning, a deeper meaning of the word mantra, as explained by Shankaracharya in his commentary on Taittiriya Upanishad. And the third and the deepest meaning is that the deep insight, the deep wisdom, the deep intuitive understanding of consciousness which arises within that state of mind. That is ultimately what the word mantra stands for, because the verbal significance, man means to think, to contemplate, and tra means to protect. And that which protects saves us from various different possibilities and enlightens to us the best possibility, or the truth. That is called mantra. So ultimately it is that deep insight. This is what I explained in great detail when I was explaining what Upanishad stands for and why the verses of the Upanishads, of the Vedas, unlike any other text in Sanskrit, are referred to as mantra. A more mundane meaning of the word mantra, which can be seen in the word mantri, which means a minister. For example, the Prime Minister of India is called Pradhana Mantri. And this word can be found not only in all Indian languages, but in most Southeast Asian languages, the word exists. Indonesians call their ministers mantri as well. And even the English word for Chinese language, Mandarin, is a perverted form of the word mantrin, which was the word used for the Chinese court officials. And because it was originally their language, and therefore the standardized Chinese, not by the Chinese, as far as I understand when I talked to my Chinese friends and asked about it, they don't call it themselves, but the English word for their language. And English people are always may come up with their own words, with their own terms. And that becomes the standard. India. So similarly, Mandarin, but it has been derived from that originally Sanskrit word. That is what Oxford Dictionary says, that it has been derived from the word mantrin. And there, mantrin means somebody who gives mantra. Somebody who gives mantra to the king, which means advice. So the other meaning of the word mantra is an advice. Therefore, mantrin literally means an advisor. Advisor to the king. Advisor to the president today. So one can also see these mantras as advices. And here, in these mantras that we are about to study, Vidyam cha yastadvedo bhayam saha, these mantras about Vidya and Avidya, about ignorance and about wisdom. Sage Dadhyang Atharvana, the master, the teacher of this Upanishad, is giving specific advice to a spiritual practitioner. And the advice is basically very simple. It is simple that even though we in our mind, we create this dichotomy between ignorance and wisdom. And of course, Shankaracharya gives this is all that he says, but Shankaracharya gives a very specific meaning to the word ignorance when he says that good practices, noble deeds, that which are done without understanding. So even action, because first we have to start with the action, and then as we act, as we work, understanding comes, understanding develops. Our understanding then deepens the action. So like this, understanding and action both really help each other, and in this way a person evolves. So his advice here is that on one side a person needs to engage themselves, because this is also the dichotomy that we find in the very beginning. The first mantra was about the awareness of universal oneness, and then the second mantra was about action, was about a very active approach. And so we create this dichotomy. Arjuna suffered from this confusion in the beginning of the 3rd chapter in the Bhagavad Gita when he asks the same thing, because somehow in the 2nd chapter, because what Krishna is presenting is only the quintessence of the Upanishads, the quintessential teachings of the Upanishads. So on one side he praises wisdom, knowledge, deeper insight, and on the other hand he tells Arjuna to engage in work. And this is what confuses Arjuna. On one side he's glorifying the light of wisdom, and on the other hand telling him to engage in work. So this dichotomy that I have quite often talked about. So again, in this last verse which we pronounced, Andhan tamah pravishanti ye avidyam upasate, what Dadhyang Atharvana tries to convey in this mantra is that one should avoid both extremes. One should avoid the extreme of action alone, just engaging oneself in charity, in good deeds. At some point, a person has to go deeper. Growth has to take place. Internal growth has to take place. So he says, Andhan tamah pravishanti ye vidyam upasate. Those who engage themselves all together, contemplate, completely go deeper into such action, which is noble, but it is uninformed. It should be taken as a preparation, because action has tremendous potential. Noble action, particularly what he said in the very beginning, tena tyaktena bhunjitha, nourish yourself by giving up, by renunciation. So when a person acts with renunciation, which means when he acts selflessly, in other words, when he acts without any selfish purpose, then that is the idea of karma yoga. When Sri Krishna talks of karma yoga, when Patanjali talks of Ishvara pranidhana, surrendering the fruits of one's actions to the universal divinity, he means the same thing. So such action has tremendous potential in terms of internal purification. By internal purification, we mean always, when we speak of internal purification, we mean purification of thoughts, purification of emotions. And what does purification mean? It means to get rid, to transcend thoughts and emotions which pull us away from ourselves, which hinder our attempt to draw ourselves back, to draw ourselves within like a turtle. Because that is why the Bhagavad Gita gives this example of a turtle and compares it to a yogi. So action, coming back to the idea of such noble action performed, first of all, engaging oneself in noble action, and then the next step is to perform it with a deeper understanding, which means as a means not for any selfish interest in worldly terms, but simply for internal purification. With that purpose, it is a great means, but one should not remain limited there. What sometimes happens is that we engage in actions of charity and we enjoy the results, and we just remain in that. We never go deeper. That is what Bodhidharma, when he went to China and met one of the most righteous, noble king in Chinese history. I think his name was Wu Ti. And met him. He was extremely righteous. And yet, to him, Bodhidharma said that the supreme goal of human existence cannot be acquired by performing noble deeds. Now, he's not saying don't perform noble deeds, but his purpose by giving him a hit, we find this in Chandogya Upanishad also, the same story thousands and thousands of years ago, where one king, he's extremely righteous, yet he realizes that this is not enough. He has to go deeper. So if somebody remains engaged in only that and does not go deeper within himself, doesn't use it as a method, as a means, as an instrument to grow deeper within, he remains in blinding darkness, because he does not know himself. He does not come to know himself. He does not come to realize himself. But then he says the other extreme is equally perilous. If you think, okay, let me not perform these deeds and just meditate, just contemplate, and not prepare myself for that. That is far more perilous, actually, according to his understanding, when he says that tato bhuya ivate tamo, those enter into still greater darkness if they have not made the effort, the practical effort to cleanse themselves, which requires activity, which requires work, which requires working with the body, which requires working with one's speech, which requires working with one's thoughts. It requires action. So if a person does not do that and simply just tries to sit down and meditate without the necessary internal purification, and that's why Patanjali comes up with this systematic path, Ashtanga Yoga, the eight-limbed path of yoga, which originally in the Upanishadic times was Shadanga Yoga. It was six-limbed path. Without Yama and Niyama were not included. Why in the Upanishadic times they were not included? Because they were the very basis. So there was no need for the Upanishadic masters. They were already understood to be there from the very beginning, so it was not necessary to mention them separate. So what we find in the Upanishads is just Sharanga Yoga, the sixth. But then he realized how important it is, particularly the principle of non-violence at the very core, and then building upon that, as the commentators, Vyasa, etc., explain that the other yamas and niyamas are just to refine the principle of non-violence as a means to purify within. So it's an ongoing process. Nobody can claim perfection in that, but each one of us can only move every moment of one's life, and when we fall down like a child, again, we just have to, with our humbleness, we have to stand up, think, contemplate why we fell down, how we fell down, and try to avoid it next time. It's part of our growth. So, that is why there he says, Yogangana manushtanat ashuddhi kshaye. The very purpose, Patanjali points out, is that the practice of these 8 limbs of yoga is to transcend, is to reduce those impurities. And if a person does not do that and just starts contemplating deeper Vedantic truths, all this is one. This universe is one principle, And sometimes when I look at the modern neo-Vedantins, it's beautiful. But what they are saying, is it really coming from an experience, or is it just, again, a faith because somebody has said it? Then it becomes a religion. Then you are making a religion out of Vedanta. Because a particular master, Ramana Maharshi, Nisargadatta, said this and this and this, and because there were thousands and thousands of people believe that they were self-enlightened, and therefore I too believe that they were self-enlightened, and therefore they said the truth, they must have said the truth, and therefore this must be the truth, and therefore this is how it is. But we are just creating another religion out of Vedanta, if it's not rooted in our own experience. For that, yoga is required. For that, the practical aspect of yoga is required. Not maybe today, but maybe today or maybe in my next class, I will come to this discussion that one of the 12th century masters, Swami Vidyaranya Muni, a great scholar of Advaita Vedanta, a great master of Advaita Vedanta, has in one of his texts and it is inspired by one of the questions asked by Narada in the Upanishads. He asks about Yogi Paramahamsa. So he uses 2 adjectives. Paramahamsa, the swan who is completely detached, that is an allegorical reference to such a being who is in the water and yet remains completely untouched by it, like a swan, Paramahamsa. But he uses the word Yogi Paramahamsa. The Upanishad, in the question, he uses the word Yogi Paramahamsa. Why do we need these 2 words? I will come back to this again. Let me just point out that both a practical approach and also a deeper understanding, both are required. What sometimes happens, many Neo-Vedantins think that the path of yoga is unnecessary, and on the other hand, yogis think that this is all just asana practice, pranayama practice, that's all. Never try to go deeper, never try to dig deeper in themselves. Both are getting lost in 2 different extremes. And the teaching here, which is trying to bring a balance, and therefore I said it is a very simple advice, but a very important advice, that both approaches, a contemplative as well as an active approach, is required. Elsewhere in the Upanishad, it is not so clear. For example, when we look at Kathopanishad, there is this statement, Duramete. These two paths, they are widely apart. Duramete, Viparite, they are actually opposite to each other. For example, one goes into the body and the other one goes into consciousness. They seem to be completely opposite to each other. Either you go on that side or either you go on that side. But the thing is that what initially somebody does not realize, that while they diverge, ultimately they meet together. So the circle becomes complete only when a person walks on both paths. Otherwise they seem opposite to each other, and Vishuchi, they lead to divergent ends. Avidya yacha vidyeti jnata. Both avidya, the path of ignorant noble deeds, and the path of wisdom. This is what has been said there. But what Dadhyang Atharvana adds, he says, yes, he will say now in the next mantra that we are about to study, that they say that something else is achieved through ignorant practices of good deeds, and something else is achieved through wisdom. Yes, that is true. But this shouldn't stop us from practicing both, because we avoid two extremes by taking the best from both and bringing them together within us. That is his vision, that is his advice that he presents in this 40th chapter of the Yajurveda, known as Ishavasya Upanishad. And this is the advice that Sri Krishna builds upon in his idea of Karma Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita. So let us pronounce the next verse, the 10th verse. Anyat, Anyat, Anyad, Eva, 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 Ahur, 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 Vidyaya, 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 Anyat, 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 Ahur, 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 Avidyaya, 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 Iti Shushruma, Iti Shushruma, Iti Shushruma, Dhiranam, 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 Yenastad, 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 Vichachakshire, Vichachakshire, Vichachakshire. Two very interesting roots that have been used in this mantra. Sorry, I forgot to pronounce the whole mantra together. Anyadevahur vidyaya, Anyadahura vidyaya, Iti shushrumadhiranam, Yenastadvichachakshire. Two roots that we come across in this second end of the mantra, Shushruma and Vichachakshire. One is the root for hearing, Shushruma, Shravana, to hear, and Chakshire is the root for Chakshu, for the eyes. So to hear, we heard this, who explained this to us. In Sanskrit, in the Upanishadic context, we often use a word, shushrusha. Shushrusha, it has come to mean to live with the masters and to serve them. That is what the word Guru Shushrusha, it's a commonly understood word. Anybody speaking Hindi and a little bit with spiritual interests would know this word. And it means Guru Shushrusha, to be with the masters and to serve them. But what it really means, grammatically, is a desire to listen. Shushrusha, Shravane Cha, the desire to listen, an inner desire to listen. So it's a beautiful word which I'm reminded when iti shushruma, we heard. So here he is quoting other ancient masters. He says that anya devahur vidyaya, something else is achieved. They say something else is achieved through wisdom, through meditation. The word vidya means meditation. We use, Upanishads often use the word in this meaning. Meditative approach in which a person goes deep within. So through meditation, something else is achieved. What is achieved? Vidyaya devalokaha, the inner realm of long-lasting inner joy, peace, bliss, a settled state of mind, inner peace, inner stillness. That is achieved when a person takes a meditative approach. And therefore, masters, teachers of meditation, they tell us to sit down, they tell us to become still, to become stable, they teach us stability. But again, the kind of stability that initially it seems as if they are telling us not to act, not to work. But their stability, the stability of a yogi, the physical stability of a yogi sitting in an asana, and then the pranic stability which is a result of a lot of pranayama practice, physical stability which is a result of a lot of asana practice, and then mental stability which is a result of and it's a very active stability. It's not a kind of when a person falls asleep. It's not that kind of tamasic stillness, but it is a very active, finding the balance between tamas and rajas, between inactivity as well as hyperactivity, finding the balance between both. That is the kind of activity it is. And yet, it might give a wrong impression that they are saying that one should not work, because this is an internal approach. There is no need to perform charity, there is no need to perform noble deeds. Just go into the forest, sit in a cave and meditate. That's all. It's just all about meditation. That's the only practice that we require. It seems like that, but that's not the case. That is one result. The result of a meditative approach is different. And anyadahura vidyaya, something else is achieved by avidya, by engaging in noble deeds in the absence of a deeper understanding. What happens when a person engages in noble deeds without a deeper understanding? He acquires recognition, respect, power, grandeur. People respect him for the great charity that he has performed. They respect him as a noble king. So he acquires some kind of satisfaction, recognition. As human beings, we require recognition because we are social animals. We are social beings. So when we live with the society, we want people to appreciate the work that we do. And so it gives us that satisfaction. But is that satisfaction compared to the satisfaction and peace that a person acquires in a deeper state of meditation? It is temporary. It is not long-lasting. It is temporary. At some point, again, a person will be faced with internal emptiness and depression, mental problems. They will come back because that satisfaction, I have given $10,000 to a charitable society. Wonderful work. A lot of recognition. Names come up in big words, and everybody is praising for a few days and few hours. Till then, everything, the life continues and it is forgotten. Or even if not forgotten, but that satisfaction, after a while, it wanes. So it is momentary. So action can only take us without a deeper understanding. Ignorant action can only take us that far. It cannot take us further. So in that sense, both approaches, the internal meditative approach and the external active approach, the same thing. It is about yoga. This principle can be applied to everything that we do. So, it can only be satisfactory as long as a bigger desire does not arise. Once a bigger desire arises, its satisfaction is over. So, anyadevahur vidyaya anyadahura vidyaya, something else is achieved through meditation and something else is achieved through non-meditative, non-contemplative, uninformed action. This is what we have heard. This is what we have heard from the wise men. Iti Shushruma. This is because in those days, particularly, the Upanishads were not written down, so you had to hear them. You had to hear these teachings. That is why they are called Shruti, the teachings that traveled from mouth to ear. And then a person held them in their heart. So we heard this. This is what we have heard from the Dhiras, from wise men. Ye nastad vichachakshire, who have explained the higher truth to us. Now, first of all, hearing, that is the first thing. Shravana, hearing. Then manana, critical analysis, which is not speaking about, but Brihadaranyaka Upanishad speaks about it. Critical analysis, then meditative experience, and then comes darshana, which means seeing, vision. For example, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is called Yoga Darshana, the vision of Patanjali. When does it come? It comes, the first step is Shravana, listening. Then it has to be brooded upon within. So critical analysis. Why did he say this? Can this really be true? Is it really like this? Let the doubts come up. It's very important. Let questions come up. As long as these questions, we do not decide to be content with these questions and we actively work to find an answer to these questions are important. So critical analysis, and then after the critical analysis has been done, then meditative insight, and then comes darshana, vision. So, but he skips all the other stages and just says that this is what we heard from those who explained it to us, who revealed it to us, in whose presence the truths were revealed. So he is completely respectful towards what he has heard from his masters. And this is slightly a different approach. For example, in some traditions we find an approach of breaking away from standing up against it, particularly, for example, in the Buddhistic tradition, even though the Buddha himself was deeply respectful to the Vedas. He uses a lot of respectful language towards the Vedas. And yet there is this approach of breaking against the convention and standing up against it. What we find in the other Indian traditions is to carry on with that and to build upon that, not openly criticizing it, accepting it, and then building upon it, building further. So it is like a child is standing on the shoulders of its parent to see into a greater distance. It's like that. That would be the approach, rather than removing and seeing for oneself. But it can be seen in that way. So this is what we have heard from the Dhiras, from the wise men. Now the word Dhira is an interesting word because it has three different meanings. The word Dhi, when used in Vedic language, it means intelligence. Somebody who is endowed with intelligence, such a person is called Dhira, an intelligent person. But the word Dhi, and by the way, it is derived from the root Dhyai, which is the root for dhyana, for meditation. So it is the same root. We are playing with same words. But the word Dhi means meditative insight, which a person develops in meditation, in contemplation. That is Dhi, somebody endowed with that is Dhira. However, interestingly, the Vedas do not only use the word Dhi in the meaning of meditative insight, but in the Vedic context, many times I have seen that the word Dhi, and this might be new to many people, that Dhi also means action. So for example, in the Gayatri mantra, when it says, Dhiyo yonah prachodayat, the light which inspires our insights, but it is also explained as the light which inspires our noble deeds, our actions. Or when the word yoga was used for the first time in the most ancient teaching in the Rig Veda, Sadhinam yoga minvate, the union of the dhis. It means both the yoga, the union of thoughts, and the union of deeds. So the word Dhi also means deed. And so somebody who is endowed with noble deeds, with good deeds, also means Dhira. So somebody who is endowed with meditative insight, somebody who is endowed with noble deeds, that's the second meaning of the word Dhira. And Dhira is also deeply related to the word Dhairya. Dhairya is the Sanskrit word for patience. Only such a person develops patience who has a deeper understanding. Otherwise, we always look for quick results. But quick results wane as quickly as they are produced. For a tree to grow, it needs time. And it's a very gradual process. And the more time a tree takes to grow, the deeper it goes, the deeper it's rooted. Trees that grow very fast, they can be uprooted very easily because their roots are very shallow. So that patience is what Dhairya stands for, and somebody who is patient as a result of a deeper understanding, he is also called Dhira. So if we put up, though most translations just translate Dhira as a wise man, and with wise we think wisdom. But the beauty of the Sanskrit word is that it gives us so many thoughts related to what that Dhira that must have who spoke to Maharshi Dadhyangatharvana, this great rishi of the Shukla Yajurveda, one of the most ancient collection of teachings. He himself is extremely ancient, extremely, far more ancient than Patanjali, far more ancient than the big names that we hear. And yet he is referring to those masters in plural, maybe out of respect, or maybe because he had many masters. So how did they look like when he referred to them as dhira? They had a deep meditative insight, which also manifested in the actions that they performed, and they had tremendous patience. Because again, as a teacher, this is one of the first principles that we need to learn, to be patient. It's extremely important. How important it is, because so many questions come up, so many doubts come up, so many problems come up, sometimes so many things happen. But we have to be patient, and we have to be, as a practitioner of yoga, and if we want to share our wisdom with others. So many, even if the kind of patience that, for example, my masters had, if I would ask a question 10 times, they would answer me 11 times. That is the kind of patience that a master requires, and that is the master that he had, in whose presence these truths were revealed to him. We still have a few moments for questions and answers. If there are any questions, please let me know. Any thoughts?
Yeah.
Yes.
You talked about the two extremes. One is the meditative and then the more practical, but you mentioned practical as, I think you were also talking about the Bhagavad Gita at the same time, but you mentioned practical and you said about doing yoga asanas and pranayama, etc. But practical yoga is also, as in the Bhagavad Gita, it's karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, isn't it?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
You talk about yoga asana and pranayama.
Yeah.
I can see how there can be some confusion and animosity between the Sankhya Yoga philosophy and the Vedanta philosophy, because these two things sometimes appear to clash.
Yeah.
But the practical yoga is karma yoga,
Yeah.
bhakti yoga, and
Yeah.
jnana yoga also.
Yeah.
And
Yet,
in there is included, of course, doing some type of physical activity.
Yes, it includes a lot of physical activity. I mean, Karma Yoga is all about seva. Seva has a lot of physical activity. And even asana, in the 6th chapter, Sri Krishna, when he speaks about meditation, he talks about the importance of asana as a still body, for a still mind. So he includes asana practice as well there. So it's all included. It's included Sri Krishna, because Sri Krishna uses sometimes he wants to keep his text as short as possible. He does not want to produce another Upanishad. The Upanishads are detailed. He does not. His Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanandana. He wants to take out the milk. And therefore his language can be sometimes very concise. So he uses broader concepts within which particular ideas have to be found, have to be recognized. So when he speaks of tapas, for example, then the yogic masters tell us that tapas includes the practice of pranayama and asana. Now, Sri Krishna also gives a lot of importance to the practice of pranayama in the 4th chapter when he discusses yajna, when he discusses sacrifices. He sees it as a kind of sacrifice between prana and apana. So he talks there in the context of sacrifice, he talks about pranayama, he talks about pratyahara, and you cannot have pranayama and pratyahara without asana. So even if he's not mentioning it, it has to be understood to complete the picture. So that is why both are. And that is how we, particularly from the 12th century onwards, this effort of bringing Sankhya Yoga on one side and Vedanta on the other side came really to the forefront in the Vedantic traditions, because now Vedantic traditions were basically taking over. They were in a situation of taking over everything. They had the great scholars, they had the mathas, they were there. They had the monasteries where people went to study. So they were really taking over the intellectual field in this country. So they had to already in the 3rd century, 4th century, when these clashes between the Sankhya philosophy and Vedanta philosophy took place in the 8th century, Shankaracharya points out that as far as the practical approach is concerned, we have nothing against yoga. We just have a few points that clash are the deeper philosophical aspects, which he points out, and the rest he fully accepts. But then slowly, to save and to bring again, his own master was a Yogi Raja, Yogindra. Govinda Bhagavat Pada is known as Yogindra, so he was a great yogi. So they were just debating one particular aspect of yoga, and with that, Vedanta, due to its brilliance, against many other thoughts of schools, it became the dominant school. And people thought of yoga.
That was one extreme.
Yeah, that is one extreme.
And now there's another extreme.
Now there is another extreme. Yes. So, as long as a person, if you see a blind person, if you tell him go left, now go left, he will go left, and he will continue walking into left direction. And then you tell him, no, but now you have to go right, otherwise you will fall into the hole. Then he goes right, and then he just keeps on going right. As long as we don't open our eyes and our own understanding, this is bound to happen. We will always, like a pendulum, swing between two extremes. And I think one of the works of the great masters is to make us aware of the two extremes, because the middle path, the balanced path, the path of yoga, is ultimately found in between always between two extremes. Yes.
You were talking also about these 4 stages: hearing, with this last mantra that we were discussing, teaching, hearing, analysis, questions, the meditative insight, and then darshana.
Yeah.
The experimental stage, that's in the analysis. It's not just, isn't it? Not just because you have to experience these things. You know, you analyze them mentally, but yet you have to live them, you have to experience them. Something has to be there where it becomes real.
Yes.
Because otherwise you hear, you analyze, you meditate on, then darshana.
Yeah.
The experimental stage is where?
Yeah, it's in between of manana on one side. When we do critical analysis, also the experience that we have helps us to analyze better. So it is these 3 things: Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. It is not that for 10 years we do Shravana, then for 10 years we do Manana, then for 10 years we do Nididhyasana. It's not like that.
You hear something, you say, okay,
exactly.
I'm going to question that. But in order to question it, you have to live it. And
you have to
experience
so
it. You have to dive in and say, okay, let me see for myself.
Yes, right? yes. So for example, even when we used to study in Kailas Ashram, my master, he used to say that now, okay, you have studied for 1 hour, now you should at least critically analyze it for 8 hours. And then meditate upon it and experience it. To reach the experience and to do it, you need 16 hours. You need more than that.
Or a lifetime even.
Yeah.
That's why I think where work comes in, when you were talking about the day, like karma yoga and the day-to-day.
Yes.
You mentioned the noble deeds into doing charity.
Yes.
But I believe also just working.
Yeah.
You know, you have your day-to-day life. You have a responsibility to family, to society. through living and
Yeah.
working and doing your responsibilities or duties, as
Yeah.
small or as big as they are,
Yeah,
then through that there's an experience that happens.
yeah,
And while you're experimenting or having this experience, then analysis,
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
comes
yeah.
into.
Yeah, this deeper understanding is also very important to perform noble deeds, because, however, it is enough to have faith in these noble teachings to inspire noble deeds. That is enough. I was talking earlier about Vedanta making into a faith. Faith is enough. Even if we have faith that we are deeply interconnected, we are universally one, that faith can inspire us to perform noble deeds. And this is something that I'm now reminded of. There is a beautiful text by Sureshwaracharya, one of the senior most disciples of Shankaracharya, 8th century. He has written this Naishkarmya Siddhi, the accomplishment of the transactive state. That is the title of the book. And he speaks of this difference between the knowledge that is there in Karma Yoga and the knowledge that is there in the deeper states of meditation. The difference is, according to him, in his language, first let me say it in his language and then I will try to explain it. For somebody engaging in Karma Yoga, in action, it is evam bhutah atma pratipattavyah. You have to accept that the self, the consciousness, is like this. He uses the word pratipattavyah. You have to accept it. You have to have faith in it. You just have to accept it. That the masters have said it, and therefore it is like this, and therefore let me engage myself in noble deeds. So that is the first stage. Then he creates a distinction. He drops the word pratipattavyah and says in meditation, the insight is evam bhutah atma. Atman is like this. So here it is the faith that the Atman is like this, and here it is the experience that the Atman is like this. So because noble deeds start in the beginning, and we cannot wait for the experience to happen. We are working towards it, but at the same time when we study these teachings, they make sense, and we feel that we are deeply interconnected, and therefore it should inspire noble deeds, it should inspire noble thoughts. So we work with it, with having some faith in it, but then later on we grow into it. So that is how, yeah.
One more little thing.
Yeah.
This thing about the noble deeds, that can be actually a little bit confusing and quite daunting.
Mm-hmm.
I think noble deeds. It seems to me that there's a stage missing here, and I believe it's part of the karma yoga.
Mm-hmm.
If people don't just start working thinking, I'm going to do a noble deed. I mean, some people do. They begin their life, they're going to do noble deeds. Okay, there are people who have that in their karma. But other people, normal people like us, we have to work.
Yeah.
I think this thing about doing noble deeds can be a bit frightening. You think, oh my God, I should be doing noble deeds. Well, sometimes it's just a matter of doing your job. Study, you have a responsibility towards your family and then towards society, then it kind of grows. And after you've done your job, it could be any kind of a job.
Yeah.
But take your responsibility and do it.
Yeah.
And through that is also is working, karma, working.
Yeah.
And then after that, if the maturity is there and through yoga, the full yoga path, then the noble deeds, after a while you think, okay, I've done this part of my job. Let's see if I can do these noble deeds. So I think there can be like small noble deeds, as in doing your responsibility towards people close to you. And then this can grow into a larger scale.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. The whole context, if we look at the whole context of Bhagavad Gita, what happened at the end, Arjuna continued with his duty.
Yeah.
He did not say, okay, now I don't need to do this, now let me go and find for myself some noble deed. It's not that. And the same thing we find, for example, I mean, we have so many examples in the mystical traditions. Santa Ravidas is there, who was a shoemaker, and his job was to make shoes, to remove the hide of dead animals and make shoes out of it. And he just kept on doing that. That was his job, that was his work.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with karma yoga. Karma yoga is selfless work. And this work you do for a payment, no?
Depends on the...
Payment is there. It's important for to some extent, even payment is important for sustaining one's life.
Yeah, but
If
it's not like we don't look for the fruits. No, karma
Yeah.
yoga is I don't look for the fruits
yeah,
of
yeah,
my actions.
yeah. That is there in karma yoga. Yet I think the point that we are trying to make is that what she's trying to make is that not giving up what we are already doing, and that is what we see in the lives. For example, now I don't know how Santa Ravidas he did it when he made shoes. He obviously would have sold them.
There are
Or
many Zen masters also that
there are
like
many Zen
continue to
masters
work,
like this,
continue
continue to
do
work like
their-
this.
But maybe they
Tavian.
didn't do it in change of money. Sometimes, you see, in karma yoga, when we go to a master, we didn't give him money, but we gave him maybe rice or vegetable or like
Yeah,
this.
anyway, back then when there was no currency, then people used to exchange things.
We live in a society, there's an exchange all the time, even if
Yeah,
it's just with
yeah.
a word or a flower. I think it has to do with the activeness of doing your karma yoga, but the passiveness inside of not getting attached to what you do.
Yeah. I think still the idea of nourishment through giving up is important. That is there. Nourishment, which Ishavasya Upanishad talks from the very beginning. So still that idea of nourishing oneself by giving up, and which is very central to karma yoga, the idea of giving up, which Maria has pointed out, that is still it is certainly very important. It is certainly very important because that is where inner development really
the
follows.
non-attachment to what
Yeah,
you are
it's the non-attachment to the results of in whatever way that happens, but it has to happen for inner development to take place. Otherwise it's just part of daily work. But if it is done with that understanding, then it doesn't matter. Then Kabir Das Ji, he was a weaver.
Yeah,
He was weaving clothes.
I mean, it seems like you're saying more it depends on the state of mind or being that you bring to your work as opposed to necessarily
Yeah.
to the work.
The Zen masters would say mindfulness.
But that comes through a process.
That comes through a process.
When you start,
Yeah.
you're doing
They would say
regular work.
whatever we are doing, where the chopping sticks, then it is chopping with complete mindfulness.
You're still doing the same thing, but yeah, that's why it's a process. You know, you're weaving or making
Yeah.
shoes or chopping wood or doing whatever work. You know,
I don't know
yoga,
if the Zen masters have this tremendous emphasis on giving up the fruit and experiencing development as a result of that, if this has been expressed very clearly. But in the Upanishadic context, that is a very important idea of unloading the idea of renunciation. And you can only renunciate something that you can claim to be yours.
It's like a sort of like an inner war within yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Even just coming to here to study yoga and to practice yoga, it means I'm not working with the children in education in my home.
It's a
So I don't
sacrifice.
create money, so it's like, what's, like, how do you balance it? For
How
example,
to balance it?
yeah, and also like, you know, being able to say to yourself, it's okay.
It's
You know,
okay.
It's okay to come in because it's also important to
It's
do
also
things
important.
Yeah.
to work with yourself and all of
Yeah.
that. It's like kind of like always like an inner world in a way. You feel like, what's the right thing to do now? I mean, is it the yeah, it's like
It's Arjuna and Lord Krishna,
Again and again.
again and
Yes,
again. It's
yes.
the Bhagavad Gita,
Yeah.
that war within.
And then
Yeah.
you know about these people that goes to a cave, I don't know, like for years and years, and they just, you know, and then you think, but
Is it
so what is
Harpaji's
the right
father?
thing to do?
Yeah.
I mean, it's,
Prabhuji.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's the beauty of life, though.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, yes, please.
You were talking about the differences between like the Buddhism approach and the Hindu. Could you maybe widen it a little bit because I didn't quite understand exactly the meaning.
The difference between the Buddhistic and the the Hindu approach is that what are known as the orthodox Hindu traditions, they accept these Vedic teachings as what they call pramana. Pramana, which simply, it is translated as authority, but authority is not the correct word. I don't like that word. Pramana simply means, prama means proper understanding, and that which is an instrument to acquire proper understanding. Like my eyes, they are a pramana. That is pratyaksha pramana. Through seeing or through hearing, I acquire proper understanding about the external world. When I see a little bit of smoke, even though I cannot see the fire, but because I see smoke, I know there must be fire somewhere. So this is inference. This is also a kind of pramana, a tool, inference, with which I can acquire proper, correct understanding. So similarly, this body of text known as the Vedas is accepted to be a tool for proper understanding, a tool for proper knowledge. However, in Buddhistic traditions, that is not there. They say that the Vedas should not be considered as pramana. What they do is then they accept Buddha's teachings as pramana, and the Vedas are just the teachings of earlier Buddhas, earlier enlightened souls. So it is just focusing on one particular person or who follows and focusing on that one person. In this approach, there is no focusing on one particular person. There are so many masters. We know the names of some and we know the names of many. Just their teachings. So the difference that I sometimes see is that particularly, even though the Buddha was not very critical of the Vedas, as I pointed out himself, there are many beautiful suttas in which he is actually critical to the modern Vedic scholars of his time who were running after wealth, kings, courts, and said, like Christ, he said, this is not what your rishis did. Your rishis were living in forests. They were living a life of renunciation. They were not living in courts. So he criticized them. Later on, in the Buddhistic traditions, the criticism became very strong. And that is what created then tension in the country. And the criticism became greater and greater and greater. So then Buddhism and Hinduism became really like two opposite forces. Yet, despite all that opposition, it was never Buddha himself, but it was other Buddhist masters. Because that is why, even as a Hindu, we deeply respect the Buddha. We read his teachings. Already in the 12th century, Vidyashankara temple in South India, in Sringeri Matha, they had established a statue of the Buddha. He is seen as one of the incarnations of the Supreme Divinity. So he is deeply respected. Because he did not have that conflicting mentality. But then the later Buddhists, they were the same people. They were the same people, just in a Buddhist garb. They were the same people he was criticizing for running into the courts, they were the same people, but this time their allegiance was with Buddha. And they were again going into the courts, controlling the kings and controlling the politics and influencing politics. So they were again the same people, but just in a different dress. That's all.
If you look at the source of religion all around the world, like
Yeah,
source
the
is
same
like
problem.
a good thing, and
Yeah.
sometimes all of the cases actually just became so like Islam, like
Everywhere. This problem is the same. It's the same. It's the same. Everywhere. Everywhere.
you have to go back to the source of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whether it is the priesthood of any religion, once they go into power, it's the same human problem. Okay, so let us conclude with universal prayer. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः